requires an element of patience, I think that that's really great.
Okay, so now I'm starting the recording for this tutorial. We just spent a few minutes discussing feedback provided by you guys, and also summarizing some feedback with from the previous session. And if you feel that there's something that you're not mentioning here today, but you can still send us an email and provide feedback, and we'll try to address it. I think we still are on time. It's week 6, so next week there is no session, by the way. If you look at the syllabus, you'll see there is a
You told me that.
Sorry?
I'm glad you said that. I probably would have shown up.
Mid-semester break. I think it's across the subjects. I'm pretty sure that
I had just assumed that break would be after Easter and before Anzac Day, because that would make more sense for the holiday. Anyway,
okay. Sorry. What Karim is saying is that the mic is not working. But look, feel free to post anything on the chat, and we'll read it aloud as you did. Exactly, no problem. Those mic issues happen constantly. No problem.
Yeah. So text, just throw it in. We'll monitor. Okay, let's actually do some content now, and we'll take all that on board and keep trying to make it better, because that's what we like to do. I know this is going to seem like a bit of a blast from the past, but I know you've all done contract law. We're going to talk about smart contracts today, and clearly where we're heading is to identify how they should be regulated, how they're similar or different from the package of tools that we have now. So I want you to think about and just share what the features of a contract are. Now, clearly the easy thing is you can think about what what legal elements we need to have in order to have a contract at common law. But I'd like you to think beyond that, like, what is a contract? What is our contract for? And really, let's get as many of these ideas in together as we can. By the way, I'm putting them on a screen so that you can interact in the way that suits you best, but do feel free to turn your microphone on if it'll work, and just share your thoughts. And Sigrid very helpfully has said that the mid-semester break is from the 14th of the 4th to the 20th of the 4th.
Yes, correct. So
perfect. I'm so glad somebody's point. Oh, well, next week is the 13th. Sorry, you have to do a class next week, and then we don't have one the following week. Because the 14th is a Thursday.
Yes, it is.
In fact, we don't have one for 2 weeks. Oh, no, we must come back on the 20th. There you go.
Oh, yes, that's the way. So the 20th, we have a scheduled one session, right?
Yep.
There's one session scheduled, which is the Wednesday, 20th of May. But and the next one next week is the one that's in the calendar. There is no session, right?
Because I've just said, so Wednesday's the 13th.
Yeah. So I suggest not having that session next week. I didn't, when we planned the syllabus, we still have all the sessions, but I planned for that week because some people have teaching on Thursday. So if you want me to double check and we'll
work it out, as long as everybody gets the tutes and the lectures that they need. I'm going to be spending the next 2 weeks getting the hackathon under control.
Yes, so we will be working behind the scenes on that.
It's looking good, actually. I've made some moves. So nobody's sharing anything about what a contract is. So nobody knows what a contract is? You've not seen them before? I know that's not true. Renee.
Hello there. I have some comments on the previous slide with regards to the tutes, but my answers didn't seem to be going through. So I'm happy to share them with you verbally, if that's okay, or unless if you want to move on to
absolutely. If you're happy to do that, I'm just giving you anonymity, that word.
Got it. Yep. No, I just wanted to say, with the tutes, what I found is I haven't had online tutes where I've had two lecturers, basically, or two tutors. And both of you complement each other really well. So I think that works great in this space. You've got someone who has some incredible real life experience and from a legal point of view, and then someone who has that real academic literature type of understanding. So
that's really,
yeah. I could have just used names. I should have just used names. But one of the things I found in having this mixed model of online and face-to-face at the same time is that the online students tend to have to chat within the chat function about a particular topic or about something that's, raised their interest, and the face-to-face students tend to engage each other in something that's raised their interest, but we don't seem to do it as a group purely because I would say of the kind of barriers that exist because of that, in that it's hard for online people to talk to the people who are in the classroom just due to technological barriers. So yeah, that's just my feedback in the regards to the mixed model of having face-to-face and online together.
Absolutely.
So at risk of, and I don't want to take up too much time from your valuable tute time in talking about this, but I'd be really interested in any ideas people have about how to break that down. It hasn't been helped by the first couple of weeks of me having such terrible technology issues, and I suspect if we had a different room on campus, we wouldn't have got into those habits, but I don't know that. And so I'd be really interested, particularly those of you who value this kind of exchange. And I know many online students really do value that opportunity to have the conversations and finding the best way to do it. And I kind of think that there are some face-to-face students who really like the opportunity to get involved in the tight chat as well. I could be wrong, but I think it's a personality thing as much as anything else. So any thoughts you have, please share them with me, because I'd really like to do it well. And
yeah, I mean, with existing technology and equipment in the classroom, it's not going to be ideal, the hybrid component, because I felt like sometimes I've been mediating between the chat and I mean, I love to do that, but I enjoy very much following being involved in the conversation and answering questions, rather than making sure that the two things merge well. So, but hopefully in new iterations, we'll be able maybe to have bigger screens in class where the face-to-face group can really see the chat or can use the chat. We'll try to, yeah.
But thank you, Renee. It's really positive. It's great. And there's a few people are putting some stuff in the various bits of technology about what I'm seeing at the moment is largely around the legal elements of a contract. So if we think about a contract, I know you can recite these things off by heart, right? We've got, in order for, in a common law environment, a contract to be valid, and what we mean by that is for a court in the same jurisdiction, so a common law court, to enforce that contract, then we need to have agreement or a meeting of the minds. Essentially, that's made up of offer and acceptance, but at the end of the day, Australian courts will find agreement even when you can't point to an offer and an acceptance each time. So we call that agreement. We have consideration. So we have that idea of an exchange of promises. We use that terrible language that I hate consideration is the price of the promise. And it really is about each party, and there might be more than two, basically has an obligation and receives some kind of benefit. We make it way more complex than that just to keep you interested, but at the end of the day, that's the main thing that's going on there. We have to have some kind of certainty. So certainty has a number of little subsections in it, but we need to be able to identify what the parties have agreed and be able to understand the terms enough to identify when they've been breached, even though they might have some nuance attached to them. Quid pro quo. I love it when people speak Latin. It's like, it just makes me feel like I can charge so much more money for my services when I can throw it in as Latin. And so they're the kinds of things that we need. We understand that in order to have a contract, we don't need to have a written document. But if we have a written document, that is going to trump people's memory of what he said and she said, that kind of thing. And we've had these contracts running for a really long time, but then they do other things. So, and some of these are coming out here. So one of the things about a contract is there is an element of trust. Or is there? We can usually identify who the parties are, and we need to be able to do that, right? So we can sue them if they don't do what they said they did. What else does a contract do? I'm really thinking about transaction contracts now. Say, let's use insurance contracts as an example. So if I purchase insurance from an insurance company, say I'm going to use the same example as last class. I'm in Lismore. I have a house, and I want an insurance to insure that house against flood. And I go to insurance company and I basically download the policy. Well, it's a policy. So is a policy a contract? What is it? Go on the internet, pick an insurer. I don't want to pick on one because I've got no idea who they are. Download a policy, agree to pay a premium. TAL, there you go. Yep, policy is a contract. Just another word for it, really. A policy, and it's an interesting kind of word, policy, isn't it, as well? Because what an insurer will do in the insurance policy is basically set out when they're going to pay out if an event happens. So an insured event happens. So we've got policy document, that's the contract terms. We've got the parties, that in this case is me and the insurance company. So I'm going to pay a premium, which is the consideration. I'm basically going to promise to pay a certain amount each month. What's the consideration that an insurance company might give me? Or do they have to give me consideration at all? Does that matter?
Are you able to read the chat, Kath?
I am. I'm seeing little bits of it. Contract is that, yep. Sorry, I am.
Oh, yeah, then. Sure.
I was probably not looking when Res told me that a policy was a contract. So insure the policy contract, policy holder. So what does that mean, insure the policy? What's the promise that the insurer is making? Essentially what they are doing is they are taking on the risk. In fact, insurance company, it might interest you to know that in medieval times, insurance contracts were generally banned largely by the churches because they were seen as gambling. Essentially, if you take out an insurance policy, you are effectively taking a bet, paying for a bet that your house might get flooded. If you win the bet, then you get paid out a large amount of money. The consideration is the promise that I will take the risk, the thing that you are insured against, away from you. And in fact, that's the language that insurers use. They talk about risk, and that's why I chose this as an example. And so if you have a life insurance policy, you're basically placing a bet that you're going to die before the insurance policy comes out. And if you win, they're always the policies you don't want to win, but, the bets you don't want to win. But if you win, then you receive the payment. And because essentially the insurer is taking on the risk of your life or the stability of your home or whatever it is. So one of the reasons I want to use that as an example is a large part of a contract is about allocating risk, about working out who is the best party to take on a risk at different parts of a contract. So with insurance, it's easy. We can see what the risk is. But if I'm entering into a contract with you to buy your business, then we'll be looking at the different aspects of the business. So, for example, I might say, well, I want to employ all of your employees, but I don't want to have to pay out their holiday pay and their accrued long service leave. So in the pricing of the contract, in the consideration, we would allocate the risk. If you're taking on that risk, then I would pay for it. If I'm taking on that risk, then you would pay for it. And usually on commercial basis, what we're trying to do is identify who's best placed to take on that risk, whatever the risk is in relation to in relation to a contract. So a large part of the feature of a contract is about moving risk away or towards a party. And I think it's important to think about that. I think another really important feature of a contract in sort of everyday use is that kind of economic feature of contracts are a mechanism, a technology, if you will, that allows entities to focus in on the thing that they do well. So whether that's because, it's an outsourcing arrangement that brings in a particular type of service into a business, whether it's a contract for the provision of services. So if you're running your own business, you'll reach a point, hopefully very quickly, where you don't want to clean the toilets and stack the shelves with stationery. So you will outsource that. You will hire somebody else, whether it's an employee or an outsourced service, to do those things for you. So contracts really together form the ways that we do business. So if we think about standard contracts in that way, can you think about the ways that a smart contract and a common law contract that we've just been talking about, what things did they have in common? And if we need to stop and just talk about what a smart contract is, because it can be a bit overwhelming, very happy to do that. Yes, please. Let's talk about what a smart contract is. I said that, and then I've got to think about how to explain it. I'm actually going to start with the vending machine analogy. And actually, I'm going to go back to contract law basics to help you think about this. I remember in contract law, everybody loves telling people whether a contract is, when you're doing fundamentals, whether it's a unilateral or a bilateral contract. Think about a vending machine, the Coca-Cola machine that Marta showed you in the slides. Is a contract, Eva, don't worry about being late, is a contract with a vending machine a unilateral contract or a bilateral contract? I'm actually just looking for the pen that works on my screen because I think I might actually draw a picture. Bilateral contract did exactly the same thing in the other one. It's very bad noise. I need a better I'm here for my own amusement. So let me stop sharing for a second so I'm kind of looking at you a little bit better with any luck. When we think about a unilateral so a vending machine contract is a bit like a unilateral contract. Well, it is we would classify as a unilateral contract. Remember back to Carl Hill and carbolic smoke ball. So what a vending machine is doing is just by its very presence, it's essentially saying, here I am, put some money in my slot and I will give you a Coca-Cola. The offer in that case is made to the world, a little bit like in Carl Hill and carbolic smoke ball. You'll remember that the medicine company put an ad in the paper and basically says, if you take my medicine, you won't get the flu. And if it turns out you do, then we will pay you 100 quid. And then to share our sincerity, we will put £1,000 in the bank. And so essentially, Renee's saying exactly the same thing. The offer can only be accepted by performance. Now, it's a bit of a kind of, it's a squeezing in of this idea of a contract because we had this idea of mutual promises, past consideration isn't good consideration, we needed offer and acceptance, all of these kind of weird things. And, you know, under the common law, the law is made based on the cases that come before it. So it's an odd kind of settlement. But if we think about a vending machine, it's basically offering Coca-Cola to the world. And the way you accept that offer, you put the machine in the slot and out comes your drink. Contract is performed in this one. And it's unilateral, not because there's one party, but because at the time the contract is made, only one party has the obligation. Now, I think if you remind yourself about that, thinking about, I'll go back. Sigrid's made the point that the person making the offer, the vending machine, I would suggest that that's actually the owners of the vending machine are through the physical manifestation of the vending machine. They're the ones making the offer. The money goes back to them. If the money got stuck in the machine and no drink came out, they would be the ones that you sue. So there's that point. Secondly, you're absolutely right, Sigrid, that in that unilateral contract, it's an offer to the world. Anyone can accept the offer. But not all unilateral contracts are offers to the world. I could say right now that I could make an offer that any person in this class who can fix my thing that makes this sound, I will make this noise, whatever. I'm making, it's an offer. It's not to the world. It's only to the people in this class. Or I might just have with one of you a unilateral offer, which is made on the basis of some just general offer. You know, if you bring me this by this date, I will. You only have to do it by acceptance. It's a little bit harder with one person, but it's still possible. So think about the unilateral offer. Think about that flow of what happens, and I think, for my money, that's the best way to think about a smart contract. So what's happening? So let's think about an example with a smart contract. I'm going to use insurance again, and let's think about flooding. So smart contract, instead of a performance issue, it needs an oracle. So the oracle could be the performance, but it could be something achieving a particular number. So I'm imagining a situation where we've got a crop of wheat, and that crop of wheat is insured against flood. So there are some sensors placed in that paddock, and those sensors identify whether it's raining or not. And if it rains a certain amount, the sensor, which is the oracle, says payment needs to be made. So if we've got an insurance contract, what would happen on that blockchain is that the insurer would deposit the thing of value. Now, whether that thing is a separate contract to get builders to come and, or, you know, excavators to come and replant the field, or whether it's some kind of cryptocurrency or some kind of equivalent of a fiat currency, that it's sitting there in the blockchain. In this way, I'm thinking of it a bit like a transparent vending machine. The insured knows that that money's there available for payout, and the parties have agreed that the payout will happen when the oracle, or if the oracle says or transmits that the payout event has happened. So in our case, it would be a certain amount of rain. Or conversely, if you were insuring your crop against drought, confirmation that there had been no rain. Is that helpful, useful? Do we have there's no body language, so I've got no way of telling whether you're on board with me or not.
Can I add something?
Please.
Just because we are going step by step with the smart contract stuff. Remember where I said in the lecture that smart contracts and oracles go hand in hand. So Kath just mentioned that sensors can be an oracle, but you can think of oracles of anything, literally. And this is the creativity of law, I guess, that can be used as oracle as long as it's trusted by the parties involved. So, for example, if the premier or if the prime minister declare a situation of disaster, that formal declaration could be an oracle, and you can say that in that case the oracle is a person declaring that state, right? So anything that from the external world is considered as a trusted source, very much like the ancient oracles in Greece, where there was a priest who interpreted the will of the gods. And by the way, that was not a mysterious interpretation. People thought that oracles were something very ambiguous. They were not. They were yes or no answers. They were binary devices. And oracles in smart contracts tend to be binary in the sense that either this has happened or not. Either this sensor has detected humidity or rain or not. Either this has been declared by a premier or not. So those yes or no binary, let's say not definitely yes or no, but binary situations can be used as oracles. Okay.
And I think that's really important because it helps us understand how one of the advantages of a smart contract is that they're appropriate in situations where you can have a decision made based on a binary call. And so one of the things I was talking about before, and actually I'm going to show it to you again. Sorry, I stopped sharing my screen. So I'll share my screen again so you can see the Chair hated how all of you, not that there are many of you, but how you disappear when I share my screen. I have to find you again. It's a very strange thing. I'm using multiple screens. That's a feedback piece. So I would like you to be thinking about this, but in the meantime, I'm just going to show you an image which I found when I was hoping it's, where is it? That was me looking at something in prep for here. What I want to do is actually just point out the Incoterms to you. I can't find anything. I'll just find it again.
And then I have a very good question again from the chat, whether a utility contract is a smart contract. We made, let's keep it now. I'm not sure if you want to address this now or later, but we had a similar discussion in the previous session. Do you remember with the standardized? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'll just throw this up so that I'm not wasting your time. Mm-hmm. But I kind of thought of this example on the run last time around, and I think that for me, it works. Oh, sorry about that. I'm just picking random articles. There's so many examples of this. So the Incoterms have been around for a really long time, and what they are kind of like a codification of the way in which in international trade parties allocate risk. And I think looking at them in this way is quite useful, because what each of them do, they're actually refined down to 3 letters. So the one you probably will have seen quite often is FOB, free on board. And essentially, when you've got a contract between a buyer and a seller, and goods are moving either across borders, whether that's by air or sea, one of the things that you're trying to work out very early on is who's going to take the risk. And essentially, we have these Incoterms that move from the ex works position, so where the seller basically only takes risk to their factory gate. From every other point forward, the buyer is assuming all of the risk, right down to the situation where the buyer only takes on the risk of the goods at the destination that they arrive at, and everything else, all of the other risks, the risks associated with the carriers, with the payment of taxes, with getting things on and off the ship, all of that is dealt with otherwise. So we can see how it's actually in situations where you're dealing with multiple languages, multiple currencies, multiple legal systems. We might be talking about common law or civil law or Sharia or other systems as well. Having a kind of shorthand allocation of risk where they're interpreted the same way all of the time is really useful for getting trade moving. And while none of this is really sitting on the blockchain, I know a lot of work's being done in that space. We should talk about that, actually. I'm really interested in that, but I think partly because it's private blockchain, actually, that it's not, because it's all being done by Maersk and by IBM, that as we said, there's another one called Waves and a few others off to the side. But until there's enough momentum, all of this happens with paper at the moment. But at the end of the day, it's binary. If something goes wrong, if goods get damaged after they leave the factory gate and the terms are ex works, then the buyer is assuming that responsibility. And similarly, if we're CIF, cost, insurance and freight, anything that goes wrong before the destination point, that is all the problem at the other end. And so having that kind of, you don't need to negotiate that. Everybody knows what it means. You can actually enter into the contract. I think that is really quite straightforward. Thanks, Renee, for the comment. Literally, if you Google Incoterms infographics, there are tons of them around because I think they're really easy to make, but I think it's a really nice visual for thinking about actually what a contract is doing, and in particular, then applying that to a smart contract. So utility contract, and sorry, I'll just put the link in there. Utility contract and smart contract. Well, what do you guys think? My sore throat needs me to stop talking a bit. What do we need for it to be a smart contract as opposed to a normal contract or a common law contract? We need it to be sitting on a blockchain, really. I mean, at the end of the day, a smart contract is a form of contract, a very simple form of contract. That's why there's so much discussion about whether smart is or isn't the right word. But I think we're in agreement that contract is the right word. I'm looking to you, Marta, to see if there's any academic discussion about whether it's the right word or not, but I haven't seen anything.
Well, there's lots of debates on whether, starting by the founder of Ethereum, who doesn't like the term smart contract because he finds it misleading. And I tend to agree with that. It would be much easier to say persistent scripts, permanent scripts that run on the blockchain. So it might be, not smart in the sense that, for example, artificial intelligence uses the word smart. But my take on that question would be, yes, I following what Kath say, a utility contract could be a smart contract. Yes, first, if it run on the blockchain, because smart contracts, we're talking about smart contracts as blockchain component, as parts of the blockchain ecosystem. So if that utility contract were running in those contracts were running in the blockchain, it could be smart contracts, because we have the elements. The meters could be the oracles, right? If it's we're talking about energy, the meters are the oracles, are the ones measuring the amount of energy we've using. And then it's a repetitive process, because it's the way it's for us, it's for other customers as well. It's quite standardized, so it has a standardizing component. And actually, I haven't seen any utility company running those utility contracts on the blockchain, but there's a lot of pilot projects for this to happen, because it could really make things more easier, especially among communities of energy consumers and providers, right? So yeah,
That would be really interesting. Actually, I know a friend of mine is involved in a development in the ACT at the moment. Like she's an architect or kind of town planner. What do they call them? Economic architects or something or other. And the idea of this development is that it should be carbon positive, and that's part of what they're exploring in that process, is the best ways to collect the information about the carbon footprint, and then to actually trigger what the consequences of those actions are. So I'm not sure whether the blockchain will be part of that or not. Oh, sorry.
I have one of my PhD students is working on a thesis for that works on the blockchain for the energy sector, and towards making the transition to renewable energies easier by having communities of people who are both producers and consumers of the energy, because they have solar panels, so they contribute to the grid, and at the same time they may consume energy. So this is called prosumers, where people are both producers and consumers. It's called prosumers. And there's lots of literature on that. I'm just posting here, for example, Energy Web, which is one of the companies that it's working on those systems, operating systems for energy grids, where these grids are peer-to-peer. And again, the idea of the blockchain is minimizing the number of intermediaries in the provision of the energy. So how the utility companies will be dealing with that in a world that people are producing and consuming energy in peer-to-peer networks. So because they still have a lot of stake in that ecosystem, they are also very interested in how the infrastructure can utilize the blockchain. But I don't want to divert to the topic today. I'm just saying that yes, there is lots of research done in the energy sector on how to leverage the blockchain for utility contracts and more broadly for the grid itself.
But with respect, I don't think we can really divert here, because the whole purpose of these tutes is to give everybody the opportunity to kind of come up with the questions that need to be answered. And if any of you are interested in a particular area, I mean, today the focus for the tute is, as planned, is the smart contracts and the DAOs, and just thinking about, well, what tools do we already have for regulating them, and do we need to start again? Should we start again? I mean, remembering that in many ways the tools that we have, we're looking at contract law now, it has evolved over time. You know, it's not even 200 years since Carl Hill and Carbolic Smoke Ball, and the technologies that were relevant to the offer that was made then, it should have been a product liability case to start off with, and we're talking about a newspaper for spreading information with an ad in it. So, what if tort law had been a little bit more developed then, and we didn't end up with this tortuous unilateral, bilateral contract kind of thing? It's all ultimately developed in some way. So I think there is the challenge to think about, well, just because we've started here doesn't mean we have to stay here. But it also, we are informed by what we have, and just thinking about what the regulatory tools are and why we need to apply them. In fact, that was one of the things that I really enjoyed listening to the Aaron's discussion when he was talking about, so he's looking at the number of cases that have involved blockchain or cryptocurrency in some way since since 2009, basically. And he was talking about the criminal cases and the extent to which there had been some sort of inference. I'm not a criminal lawyer. I'm already forgotten the language that he used there, but that inference that if you are a drug dealer or a weapons dealer and you're using blockchain, that somehow the punishment should be higher, and actually standing back and saying, well, actually, what is the purpose of the punishment and what does that actually mean? And I don't know the answer to him that we have. I'm not sure that I agree with him that up until recently all drug dealers have been bikies. I'm not sure that's exactly what he said, but close. But I think we should ask those questions, like not only what is the contract for, but what is the law for? Why do we need to enforce it, and where do we need to enforce it? I have not inspired you with that question, so I'm just going to I'm going to share off because I want to move into the DAOs, but I want to just make sure we're talking about the right things. In fact, I'm just share this question this time. So thinking about smart contracts, can we regulate them with what we've got, or do we need to start again? Let's chat about that. In the chat is equally good to throwing something on my Menti. These look like two kind of sides of the same coin. And that wasn't my intention. It's purposeful, these two questions, because I think you can strongly disagree with both. I don't think you can strongly agree with both, but I think you can strongly disagree with both. That contract law might not be the right mechanism. And I do wonder to what extent consumer law in particular might be, particularly for these kind of self-affecting contracts, might be useful. So a range of different kind of views here. This is what I love about these Mentis. I love how you can sort of see where people sit, because the average can be quite unhelpful sometimes. So we've got some relatively strong disagreement. Anybody who's disagreeing, I'm guessing we've kind of got people around the 2. Any ideas of what we should be using instead? Either saying that she can see how contract law is applicable to smart contracts more than she can see existing laws being adequate for regulating other forms of tech. But it's hard beyond that. Absolutely, because we can't predict the future, can we? And maybe that's one of the reasons the common law works the way that it does, and that we kind of get stuck with law that's developed out of the cases that have been decided. That's
so true. I mean, we we tend to forget the divide between common law and civil law, but that's one of the beauties of being two tutors, because Kath has been trained in the common law tradition, and I've been trained in the civil law tradition. And let me give you an example with AI that I was sharing yesterday with a panel that I was a part of. The European Union has been working for the past 3 years in a general draft to regulate artificial intelligence in Europe, as if that was so easy, because as we said in the previous topic, artificial intelligence is an umbrella term, and very soon blockchain will be again an
I think
umbrella
they should have
term.
asked that they should have asked the GPT-3
Yeah.
bot, like, to just draft the legislation for them. I think that would have been a good idea.
Yeah, so doesn't occur to me that common law countries would have such an overarching approach to regulate artificial intelligence the way that the European Union is trying to do. And I know that the European Union is emerging of legal traditions, but mostly and foremost, it's civil law tradition, especially now with Brexit. So I tend to think that that the divide, it's still very clear, because one way to approach these new technologies is by setting a legal framework that tries to capture how the technology will evolve. Good luck with that. The common law approach, I think, is more flexible in that. It evolves through case law.
But it leaves holes, doesn't it? And I think about it. I'm about to share a very unformed view that I suspect is kind of percolating. But I think I remember when I did tax as a law student, and one of the overriding principles I remember is that a good tax law is a law that doesn't influence the way investment decisions are made. Now, clearly, there are many tax laws that are designed to influence the way decisions are made, like things like you spend more money on cigarettes because we don't want people to use them, or we've got excises on petrol. Well, we did, because we want people to look after the environment. So there are sort of their purposeful nudges. But on the whole, a good tax law is a law that raises revenue without influencing behaviour. And it seems to me that a good technology law, whatever that means, that would be a good starting point for thinking about it, that it doesn't influence where creativity or innovation can go with the technology. Now, as soon as I say that out loud, I think, well, what about, weapon bots and things like that? But I think, well, they're kind of like, maybe they're the cigarettes and alcohol and, let's face it, weapons of these rules. There are some obvious carve-outs that you have, or maybe they're not so obvious, and we need to think about that. I also think as we develop these laws, there are big differences between the way common law develops now from 200 years ago, that it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, that the common law, if the courts will make decisions, but they'll take into account what's happening around the world as well, because the jurisdiction it matters less and matters more at the same time. But of course, these are, from a practical point of view, as a transactional lawyer, I just want to know, well, what does that mean for how I allocate risk when I'm trying to sort things out for my clients? I know what they want to do. I got to work out whether it's been regulated before, and then what the likely attitude is going to be. And, frankly, as a technology lawyer, what that means is most of us are making it up commercially, because there are fewer and fewer actual disputes, because nobody wants their contracts out in the open. And interestingly enough, it becomes a really closed loop, because only the biggest law firms who are doing particular work are really seeing what's happening. There's a really interesting project that's going on at the moment, which I've been meaning to bring to your attention with, I think they're called Clause Stack, And they started off being called One NDA. And essentially, it's a simple document automation. But what they did is they crowdsourced the terms for a non-disclosure agreement, a confidentiality agreement in a commercial state. It's run out of the UK, I think. And now they're trying to create the One DPA, so data processing agreement, on the basis that data processing agreements are super long and complex. They take a long time to negotiate. But at the end of the day, they're still just doing one thing. And so it may well be that the legal community creates contracts and standards outside of what the law says to find consistent ways of regulating these things. I don't know. These are all the sorts of things you guys get to grow up and explore, and remember how off or close to reality I was as I was making predictions. But what else might we use other than contract law? Has anybody got anything that they might suggest there? My natural inclination is to think about consumer law and consumer protection, just because of the nature of the use cases that I imagine. The kinds of issues that could come up. Like if I'll go back to my crop of wheat, and I bought some sensors that come bundled with a smart contract for my insurance, or I've got a contract with my insurer and it's all bundled in this smart contract with these AI sensors, and it turns out that there's some technology issue in the way the sensors work. I don't know. I can't program those sensors. I don't know whether they're programmed correctly or not, but does the insurance company? So there is that kind of fitness for purpose kind of question sitting around. I don't know, what else do people think? We all get tired by this time, don't we?
Then in that case, just let me add that to
equity.
Equity. That's excellent, Renee, because that was touching the comment I wanted to make here, that all these are different types of law, consumer law, contract law, and that's the broad legal framework. Yet what we are seeing as well in the blockchain space is the emergence of dispute resolution mechanisms that are doing this negotiation and arbitration under the shadow of the law, as we speak normally in that space, because ultimately there's always the possibility to go to court and use consumer law or private law or whatever law it's relevant to the case. But services such as Kleros or Aragon Court are crowdsourcing the dispute resolution of smart contracts. So we could all become a juror under Kleros, for example. We just need to have some knowledge of the issue at stake, of course, and stake Pinacleons, which are the tokens for to become a juror in Kleros. And again, these are Greek terms that come from the ancient Athens in democracy. The Kleroterion was a voting machine, and the Pinacleon was a token that you would use for the token machine. So let's say that there's a disagreement on how faulty a sensor was in a smart contract, as an oracle for a smart contract. So instead to go to courts, you could use some of the services. And for instance, Renee and Eva and Kath and I are the jurors. We don't know each other. We work independently. We listen to the parties, and we vote on a verdict on whether the sensor was faulty or not. And we haven't used any of the normal jurisdictional settings. So that's a possibility, the emergence of a dispute resolution system within that ecosystem that doesn't need to go to courts, or that goes to the courts only as a last resort.
And I mean, I personally find that really exciting. And another way I'm kind of stand back from and think, oh God, my whole livelihood, what happens with it? But I think about the times, I've sat there and negotiated contracts in really complex IT deals. And one of the questions we keep having to come back and asking ourselves as we're drafting the contract is, how would you explain this to a judge? If something goes wrong, how do I make sure that a judge understands what it is that we were expecting to do and how it works? And the reality is there's lots of really, really smart judges. They're really, really clever people, but they don't necessarily understand how sensors work, or they don't have that engineering or that life experience. That means it's just costly and difficult to explain these processes. Now, some of that's changing. I think that's another thing that sort of came out, or I was thinking about, I was listening to Aaron's piece on the research that's been done, or that he's been doing on the way that courts have looked at these kind of issues, was that whole question of, judges are carrying a kind of bias with them, where if you've got blockchain, if you've got Bitcoin, you must want to be a bad guy. I'm oversimplifying, I know, but and I think where you've got a jury of people who know what they're talking about, or can understand the issues, you can actually deal with things very, very efficiently. And even just the way we crowdsource this kind of thing, hoping my next slide is the one that I want. Oh, no. I was going to get us actually a couple back, but there are a couple of issues that I was kind of identifying as kind of the issues for that could be the most challenging as you're thinking about identifying smart contracts. And just using technology like this for many of you as play along is we can rank them. Now, I don't know that I've picked the right things, but there are challenges as you think about, actually, if we think about privity, maybe I've got privity in two ways. That idea of pseudonymity, that idea that you can have a contract with somebody but never actually know for sure who they are. The questions around jurisdiction, when you've got these kind of international unilateral contracts, which law applies if something goes wrong? What is enforceability even relevant to a smart contract that self-executes? When everything is contained within the block and all of the information passes in the direction it should pass when the contract terms are met, like is enforceability even a relevant thing? Privity, do we need privity in this sort of situation? Or that kind of question around the high reliance on technology versus a meeting of the minds. So I feel like I'm relatively tech savvy, but if I enter into a smart contract, I do not understand the code. Like I will have to rely on what I'm told about it or read about it to be a party to that. I can't examine the code. Where if I enter into a contract with Marta, whether I'm right or not, I can believe that I achieve a meeting of the minds. So anyway, they're my kind of issues. I'm explaining those, but I'm also thinking about actually the power of large crowds, just using fairly simple technologies now to actually rank what's most important and not important. For those of you who are interested in that One NDA program or project, I'll send you a link to it, but you will see that they actually unpick the legal issues and then get lawyers and others to vote on which ones are most important. And they're just crowdsourcing what a standard non-disclosure agreement should look like. So I'm working on the basis we're all too tired to play today. I want to talk about DAOs. So I can't remember what I said about DAOs last time. I think I tried to explain what they were. Is it useful to you if I have another go at doing that? Kind of giving you a basic picture of what a DAO is? I'm getting a nod there. Yep, cool. Okay. So again, I'm going, this is a little bit harder because I know that not all of you will have done company law. I'm going to use a less ridiculous example. So let's say, I'm just going to do Kat's not even close to accurate description of what a company is first, and then we'll look at how a DAO is similar or different. So just say I have a business where I just sell people little positivity statements.
I'm a dreamer, a planner, and a doer.
So there you go. You can buy these little positivity statements from me, and all of you think that this is an excellent business and you want to invest. So basically, one of the first things you could do is you could just invest your money. You could just give it to me, right? And I can run my business however I like. And I've just borrowed the money and I have to pay you back with interest. But if you and I want to do business together, our next option is we bundle our resources in some way. Now, we could have done a partnership, but we're just going to skip straight through to a company. And so a company is a legal fiction when you think about it. And so I just want you to imagine this transparent envelope is the company. All of you are shareholders. You have given me some investment funds. I have my core intellectual property, my Think Positive advice.
I'm inspired.
There you go. I need this every day. But basically, I'm the sole director of this company. You've given me your money. You are all shareholders of this company. And that means that once a year I have to report to you, and you have some limited ability to vote on a couple of things, but essentially I am the management of this company. In fact, I could ask Marta and not my dog, but my dog is the closest thing I thought of, to be the other directors, to be executive directors of the company. They may not even be investors. They can do anything you like. And the next thing, we stop being positive, and instead we've got...
I'm sorry!
We've got an apology service. It's all quite different from what you invested in. And that's how it works. And because we've got this company that is basically the treasury plus the business, it's got its directors and its management that do stuff, and the shareholders are quite removed. They've got limited liability. They've got very limited ability to make decisions, but they invest. And if I lose all the money there's nothing left. But if I make lots of money, ultimately that gets paid to the shareholders. So when it comes to the law will look at things like, are the directors doing the right thing by the shareholders or by the company as a whole? Are the directors doing the right thing by creditors? So there are laws that, and we use that language, pierce the veil. So go behind this legal fiction to work out whether or not the humans are doing the right thing. And so as the humans do the things that they do, we've got that central point of the management team. What is a DAO? So a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. So it is organized not on a share register, and a share register is just a form of ledger when you think about it, but it's organized on a blockchain. And theoretically, at least, and in practice in real cases, a DAO doesn't have a central owner. It doesn't have a person who pulls the strings. Now, in practice, I'm still trying to get my head around how that actually works, because I can't help but think, an elephant is a horse designed by a committee. How do things actually happen day by day by day if you have nobody actually responsible for making the decisions? If everybody can not only vote but initiate the things that we're going to vote on. I think in practice, we see ourselves kind of going back to something that I imagine being a little bit more like a club or a partnership even, but without necessarily the limited liability, where what is actually happening is that there are people who will always want to be like shareholders. I mean, I will be one of them. Most of my cryptocurrency investments, small as they are largely things that I can stake, which effectively means I'm giving my cryptocurrency to somebody else, lending it to them. They pay me interest for the right to be able to use it to vote. Most of the ones that I have are like online games, because I don't know anything about any of this stuff. And I ask my son whether he's heard of the game or whether he can play it or not. And these decentralized organizations, the players, the people who love these online games, they're the ones who are making decisions about where the infrastructure should be, what happens. So me as the director of my company, I can change the business pretty much without any interference. But in this decentralized version where everyone has a voice, everybody can exercise that voice. So Sigrid's asking who owns the decentralized autonomous DAO. Oh, sorry, you look like you were just about to go in there, Marta. And I'm always
sorry. I was texting an answer, but a wide one. At the moment, most jurisdictions will consider any non-incorporated DAO just a partnership.
Yeah. Yeah, so the partners, the owners of the, so, and look, there are so many discussions that are going on about DAOs. So one is, are they separate legal personalities? Should they be separate legal personalities? Are they akin to a company in some way? I've started with a company because that's what I understand. But are they closer to a partnership, which is really a form of contract? It's really a form of organization. I often find myself asking, are they really autonomous? I mean, at the end of the day, somebody will always start them, will be the founder, will be the person who has the vision as to where the software is going to go. And like many investors, will basically follow what's happening and not even participate in the voting. I don't think I would know how to participate in the voting of anything that I've had any ownership with. The question is also like, what is the thing that, is it a currency, the cryptocurrency, when you make your investment in it? Is it a cryptocurrency? Is it a form of security? Is it, and by security here, I don't mean debt or credit security, but it might be. I mean, is it a share, or is it more like a unit in a unit trust? Or is it something entirely different? Are we narrowing the possibilities by thinking about it in terms of the company? I mean, a company, the kind of English common law idea of the company is actually a technology that hasn't been around all that long, really, and has been evolving over that time. Let me show you. I'll just pop ahead on a couple of my slides. I think we've been asking this question. The language on this slide annoys me, but this is just taken from a blog post, but it's really quite a good summary of what Senator Andrew Bragg has said in the Senate committees in Australia fairly recently. I will share that information. I don't want to go with a date. So he's put forward that any kind of DAO needs to basically be able to address these kind of legal questions around if we're going to legally recognize DAOs as some kind of form of entity akin to a company, then we need to be able to identify, well, who are the responsible people within a jurisdiction, which is kind of an anathema to how a DAO is supposed to run. but I suspect in practice that's how they do run. The consumer protection issues, audit assurance, product disclosure, those kind of questions, limited liability. You know, I don't think most of us, when we make, even if it is just a specky Bitcoin type of a cryptocurrency investment, we're not expecting that we could have pass-through liability to the underlying technology or mission of whatever that DAO is. And something like replaceable rules. Do we need those things? I think these are really interesting questions, and they really ask me to question some of the assumptions I make about what matters and what the law is for. So we're very close to time, and I don't really want to fry your brains. My mission is always to raise more questions than give you answers. And I can't give you answers on any of these, but I do think it's a fascinating question. You know, where do we think the DAO is going? How long can we wait? And what approach should we be taking, if any? Because the issues, I mean, this is not even touching on tax and revenue. And Sigrid's asking, so if something goes wrong, who becomes responsible? And I think that's one of the biggest questions we have. Everybody and nobody.
So yeah, actually in partnerships is if I'm correct, there's no limited liability.
Yeah, in a common law partnership, so which is the kind of partnerships, we do have some limited liability partnership options, but they're quasi companies in Australia.
Yeah.
Then, you know, and basically a partnership happens when two or more people act in concert with a view to making a profit, or have a business in common with a view to making a profit. Somebody has done company law more recently, which is where they learn about partnerships, bizarrely. They'll know that. But there is no limitation on liability. That's one of the reasons why companies were created. So
exactly,
gentlemen could take risks with other gentlemen's money.
Yeah, exactly. So companies are an evolution on that sophistication, and there's lots of discussions around DAOs as potentially becoming new legal entities, but for that they need recognition as such. And the other thing is that some DAOs are refusing to legally incorporate anywhere because the philosophy is we don't depend on any national jurisdictions. We want to remain stateless and a-jurisdictional. And in that case, well, can this be really achieved? There's no intersection between the DAO that exists digitally and any national jurisdiction. Some people are putting a lot of emphasis in pseudonymity of DAO members, so they cannot be identified as members of any particular jurisdiction. They're putting emphasis in running everything through smart contracts, so there is no legal connection between the smart contract and whoever triggered the smart contract. So this, to summarize, because we've got only 3 minutes. Watch the space, because we will see a lot of developments, and maybe Australia is one of the countries proposing DAO legislation ahead of the pack. So far, it's been a couple of states in the US, a couple of Malta, Singapore ahead of the pack, but Australia could be one of those. We don't know, but there's been a lot of discussions on that as well.
And I think it's actually, it's what in a design thinking terms we would call a truly wicked or complex problem, because there are so many moving parts and there are composing interests. So, I mean, I never thought I would say this out loud, but I think the tax issues are some of the most interesting, because like just tax issues are most interesting. I can't believe that's actually on a recording now. But they really are, because when you're looking at companies with an ESG focus, you're looking at how countries raise revenue, and about what the implications are. And you can end up in this situation where a particular structure actually then siphons wealth off in a way that it's never actually going to go into the revenue coffers of any country. Now I can see benefits and problems with that. And maybe we have technologies now that mean that we can distribute the tax burden significantly more fairly, because the maths is not as hard to do as it used to be. But on that cheerful note, I think we're done. We will double check what the time is, but it sounds like we don't have a tute next week, and that the next one will be on the 20th, which would mean we've got basically 2 weeks of no tute, and all that will be packing down the other side towards the hackathon, which will be so much fun for me.
Just let me rest assured. I'll be reachable through email. So if you still wanna check with me, with us, topics for assignment 2, I'll be reading those emails, perhaps except Good Friday and and that weekend. But I'm not going on leave next week. I'll be around, and so please feel free to email me with any issue with regard to the course. Okay.
Awesome. Well, unless there's any questions,
You're very
I'll
welcome.
see you in 2 and a bit weeks.
Yep.
It takes a bit to get your head around this stuff, but it is really worth thinking about it. All right, my friends, we'll see you soon.
Just stopping the recording now.